me just ask, I think as a reflection of part of the change, is when I was in law school, I was in what was an intern program called the Police Writer Program, which was wonderful. We wrote on the weekend evenings with police officers, which gives you great insight. And I remember one of the first things I observed was when police officers made a traffic stop and got out of the car, the first thing they did was unstrap their gun and put their thumb on the hammer of the gun. And I always thought at the time, I said, wow, that's incredible. I mean, he's right there ready to draw out the first sign. And I asked him about that. I said, why do you do that? You know, when you're stopping just the traffic. And it was like, you have to be ready every minute. I don't see that anymore. So, you know, I don't know why. That is part of training, part of something, but you don't see the unhook and strap and hand on the gun as soon as they get out of the car. But certainly today's environment is much more dangerous, objective, because there's just a lot more weapons out there, and there's a lot more use of violence on the streets than there was 30 years ago. So you would think it might even be more, but in fact I think it's less in terms of them having a hand on the gun.
Yeah, if I got one additional thing as to Roselle's question, and perhaps this is inappropriate, but I'm going to say it anyway. For what it's worth, we should all continue to weigh in on our legislators on the insanity that continues to come out of the legislature in terms of gun possession. And I don't know it'll be any good, but we continue to need to be the voice of reason in terms of gun regulations in the state.
As a civil libertarian, I totally agree.
Yes, sir. Regarding that, regarding the last statement, could you give examples of where the legislature has gone off on a bad tangent as far as gun ownership is concerned?
Certainly. Two examples of the most recent legislation that allows that has narrowed the areas in which a person can be deemed to be in illegal possession of a handgun without a permit. They expanded it to a person's vehicle, another person's vehicle, another person's house. That's one example. And the other is limiting the ability of municipalities to enforce restrictions against where handguns can be carried. That's two examples of the most recent legislation.
Now, why is that happening? I mean, what is the pressure on a legislature that they would do such a thing?
NRA.
That was precisely my response.
We've talked about deadly force. Oh, I'm sorry. That's another question, I think.
I thought you had a follow-up for sure.
Well, I was going to say, I think, too, maybe one part of that argument is that if you're a gun owner and you've been certified by the government to hold and carry a gun, if there's a lot of restrictions to that, to where you can carry it, that in effect takes away the advantage of holding the gun, because you can't really carry it around then, because you've got other kind of laws that interfere with where you can carry it. And I think that's a pressure from the NRA that's coming. So the point is, isn't it, that if a person has a legal right to carry a gun, has been certified by the government, I mean, it's almost like the same right as a police officer carrying a gun, then why shouldn't they carry that gun into areas that are part of your normal what shall I say, running around town. You have a gun, you want to go to the library, you want to go to a friend's house, you want to go to another person's car. Or if you take all that away, you might as well not carry the gun at all, period.
Right. Well, and I guess I would have a fundamental disagreement with you in that I certainly have nothing whatsoever against responsible gun owners, but I believe we need to balance the right of an individual to carry a weapon under reasonable terms against our interest as a community in limiting those areas where weapons be carried. And we can have this discussion forever, and there's no one could convince me that we should be able to carry guns into city parks, for example.
Two points, if I could, on that. One is the state doesn't do anything to certify that a person is a responsible gun owner. It doesn't take anything to get a gun license. They don't have to be trained, they don't have to know how to use it, they just get a license. Second point is, any idea that a person can be safer because they're carrying a gun or if they have a gun in their home is clearly illusory. The evidence is clear that having a gun in your home increases your risk of getting killed by a firearm, whether it be yours or somebody else's.
But does that also make an officer's job to be able to make those decisions a little more complicated? Because now an officer, when they went into a library, would assume that the only person in there carrying a weapon would be quote unquote an alleged potential bad guy, somebody that was carrying a weapon illegally. Now it's legal, and if Stan Solomon clone wanted to wear their weapon on their belt, which I think under the law they would be entitled to do, all of a sudden if I'm an officer, I'm going to have my antenna up, not knowing what that person is or is not going to do with that weapon.
I agree, and it goes back to the original point that Roselle made as well. It's a changing environment out there, and it requires a need for greater awareness and at the same time greater restraint by the police officers. I think they do a pretty good job of balancing those interests, but it is a new reality out there.
We've talked about deadly weapons, and I have to be very cautious because there's some active cases that involve, quote unquote beatings or things that doesn't involve deadly weapons. But given that, I always see on ESPN that athletes today are bigger, faster, stronger, harder to take down. Does the training match the ability of officers to be able to restrain an individual in a responsible way that does not cross that line of force?
Well, once again, I'm not holding myself up to be an expert in the training, but from my understanding and from cases that I've tried in federal court on allegations of excessive force and learning about the training process and the regimen the officers go through. Many of your listeners may know that there is something called the force continuum, and it is kind of a model that officers have been trained on for years on how to respond to a threat that is posed by a given suspect. So it starts with officer presence. Does the mere presence of the officer and the uniform and the badge cause an orderly compliance with what's going on and obviate the need for any violence? Then you have verbal commands on what needs to be done. If someone is suspected that they need to be taken under arrest, do they comply with the fact that they need to put their hands behind their back and submit to being handcuffed so that they can go down and be processed? And it goes all the way up the line from if those levels don't control the situation, officers are taught that they can go to what are called soft, empty hand techniques, using their hands, using their strength to get something done. It goes up to another level of harder techniques and that can be used, strike motions to get someone under control and get them handcuffed. You go to intermediate weapons and tasers and use of chemical sprays before you get to deadly force. In my mind, one thing that the average citizen doesn't realize is they somehow tend to think that if we see someone that is hurt as the result of an interaction with police, they equate that with immediately there must have been something went wrong. Something must have happened, there must have been police misconduct in that situation. I think there's a fundamental disconnect in people that want to say because someone got hurt in a situation that was associated with police, they therefore got hurt in a situation caused by the police. And you just got to go back to your playground days. People roughhouse, and that's what happens on the street when someone doesn't want to be taken into custody, and people are going to get hurt. But that does not mean that there was excessive force or misconduct by the policeman just because you have injuries. That's a real important thing that the community has to be mindful of in at least waiting to hear all the facts.
Do our defense counsel wish to weigh in?
No, just to say that hopefully technology will continue to help out with alternatives to the use of deadly force. So that we have tasers, pepper sprays, things other than to apprehend or disable someone without having to shoot them. So we have seen some advancements. Hopefully we'll see more.
Yes.
Thank you.
I want to go to the aspect of prevention again. I certainly experienced this on both sides. The pressure cooker that police officers are under. I have a very good friend who was 20 years on the force and just recently retired. A meditator, a big guy, keto specialist, he had the presence to be able to control the situation, and he wanted out because of the pressure. And so I think, we have a responsibility as a society to curtail some of those pressures. And it's too bad there's not somebody from IMPD here, but there's also the aspect of, there's that study that says, that when police focus on the broken windows, it helps prevent crime from escalating. Well, the same thing I think is true when there's these more or less minor infractions by police officers in the way they deal with citizens. My friend Tim Harmon, who was arrested down in Fountain Square for doing basically nothing and was just treated horribly, has written a wonderful book, by the way, about that, called "A Day in the Life of a Very Bad Person." And it is just a wonderful, whimsical, and yet kind of gut-wrenching way, especially if you know Tim, of exploring in a community setting why police officer arrogance, verbal brutality should not be tolerated. We should stop these things at the broken window stage, not waiting until they get to deadly force.
That's
And
interesting.
I highly recommend Tim's book.
It's an interesting way of a new twist on the broken windows theory. Anybody want to weigh in on that?
Well, as I understood his point is that we should not tolerate low-level offensive conduct by police officers, just as we should not tolerate a police action shooting. And I absolutely agree. And that I don't want to go back to campaign stump speeches, but we view one of our primary challenges is restoring trust in the prosecutor's office and the police department. And we have made it clear that we want our prosecutors to act in a professional manner, and we do what we can to work with, particularly at the district level, through our community prosecutor unit to make sure that we're communicating that same message to our police officers. We cannot effectively address public safety issues on our own. We need the community, and so we need to engage the community on a professional level for sure. I agree.
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to put in a pitch for a civilian review. I know the county council for years and the ACLU struggle with trying to create a meaningful civilian review body that had some authority and teeth in it to do investigation for police misconduct. I think that's a critical part of restoring public confidence, that we have to have that kind of opportunity for citizens to think that if they make a complaint about police conduct, that it's going to get serious inquiry and there's something that can be done about it, other than just through the chain of command of the police department.
We got about 5 minutes. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I want to thank Scott. Oh, okay, fine. I did bring a copy of the book for each of the panel and for you, Amos. And I wanted to bring the level of this police abuse down from shooting to what really happens, every day, which is why I published, my book and the story of what happened to me or something. But it's, I really feel, what needs to be addressed is the police force has totally gotten away from serving the community. The first contact that we have with police is confrontational, and it, God help you if you make eye contact, because it gets even worse from there. I will say, Mr. Landis, the Citizen Review Board is just ridiculous. I mean, it's just, the police are always right. If you just do what the policeman said, they read the police report. Citizens are not allowed to speak. You're invited to come and sit quietly, but you can't say anything in your own defense or in what actually happened. They read the police report, and then they say, well, obviously the police are right and the citizen's wrong, and it just goes on, and it's really embarrassing, and it does really need to be improved a whole lot. But the abuse is, fortunately for me, it didn't escalate to being shot.